Well, hello, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. And thanks very much to John Murphy and the Democratic Club of Quail Creek. And also, I want to say just a word about what you just saw. The moral of that, if you want to call it, of that little video is we need to take care of the land. And that's really what a lot of this is about. So we're going to start by looking at the eastern side of the Santa Rita Mountains, what was talked about in the Ours is the Land video. And this is the Rosemont Valley. This is the proposal that HUD Bay has been working on for some years. And I'm going to go under the assumption that you don't all know everything about this. I'm sure some of you do. But I want to give a little background in what is going on with Rosemont, the east side of the mountains. And then we'll move over to the west side and see what's happening more recently. I do also want to say that although this is being hosted by the Democratic Club of Quail Creek, which we appreciate, this is not a partisan issue. It is an issue that the impacts of this mine will affect everyone, and we really need to think of it that way. So who are we, Save the Scenic Santa Ritas? We're a nonprofit based in Southern Arizona, formed in 1996, and our focus is very simple. It is to address the issues related to mining activities, degradation from mining that would happen in the Santa Rita Mountains. If you look to the right on this slide, you'll see that down in the lower part, it shows the Coronado National Forest. That's the Santa Ritas, and the blob is where the Rosemont mine would be, just to orient a few of you if you don't know where we're talking about. Again, we're on the east side here, and this is the Rosemont proposal, the big pit, which would actually be higher than it shows in this diagram. It would be a couple thousand feet deep, a half a mile wide. And we show on that black dotted line, everything on the other side of that would be tailings piles going up to 700, 800 feet. You would not be able to see the mountains from where we're standing on Highway 83. Be several thousand acres that would be completely gone under hundreds of feet of tailings piles, as would the whole Calm Village site that was spoken about earlier. So I'm going to not read all of these statements, but you can look through them and you will understand perhaps a bit better. This is the original proposal, Augusta Resource, which was a company from Canada, as is HUD Bay. Augusta is called a Canadian junior. And that's not a derogatory term. It just means that they are speculators in mining activities. So they came here some years ago, and I think they kind of got hornswoggled by some local folks who made them think that this was going to be an easy slam dunk. They were going to be able to mine in the Santa Ritas, no problems at all. Well, it turned out it was a little more difficult than they thought. But their original proposal would have been for about a 20-year mine. And that in itself is pretty alarming, to think that you would destroy the northern part of a mountain range for 20 years of perceived economic benefit. If you go down a couple more lines there, you'll see 3,300 plus acres of Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management land, mostly Forest Service, that would be completely covered by tailings, the waste pile, the mill, and so forth. The pit would be more than a mile wide, a couple thousand feet deep, certainly visible from Highway 83. And Augusta purchased this land in private land and mining claims in 2005. And I do want to reiterate, I'll probably say this several times, these are private lands. These are in-holdings that the mining companies, various mining companies, have been interested in since the early 1900s. They were mined before the forest came into an existence. So they are in-holdings within the national forest. It's unfortunate, but that is the case. So in 2014, Augusta sold to HUD Bay, another Canadian company, for about 500 million in stock options, not real money. So HUD Bay comes in, they are a real mining company, and they also have been hornswoggled in that they think this is going to be a very easy thing for them to do. So just to give you a little bit of more kind of visual information on the Rosemont proposal, if you put the pit and you stick a mountain inside it and the downtown buildings in Tucson, you can get a sense of how deep this pit is. it would be much deeper. It would go down through the water table. Ultimately, there would be a toxic lake. About half of it would be full of a toxic lake once the pumps are turned off at the end of the mining operation. And that toxic lake would be there forever. If you need a little help in visualizing the scale, the size of this mine, we've placed it over the top of Tucson. The northern street is Glen, the southern street is 22nd Street, the west or left side is basically the Santa Cruz River, I-10, and the right side is Tucson Boulevard. How did we get into this position? Why are we fighting battles like this on beautiful national forest land that have cultural values, as the Atam have said, scenic values, wildlife values, all kinds of other values that we all love? It's because there's an 1872 mining law that is still in business. It was passed when President Grant was president, a long time ago, before Arizona became a state, and it has really not changed much. At that time, as you can see by the wonderful photo, mining was done with a pick and shovel, and that's not the way it's done now. We all know what modern mining looks like. And it's not to say that there isn't some value in mining, there is, but I think it needs to be rethought in this country. Unfortunately, the 1872 law has virtually nothing in the way of environmental or reclamation requirements. It relies on the states. Some states have better reclamation and environmental laws than we do. We like to say sometimes that the easiest place in the universe to mine is the state of Nevada. The second easiest place to mine in the universe is the state of Arizona. Modern mining, this is what it looks like. In 1960s, Secretary Stuart Udall was in office. He was Secretary of the Interior. Of course, he was from Arizona. And as he was leaving office in 1969, he wrote the following: that the mining law of 1872 is anti-conservation. It's a giveaway of the resources. It also gives people the right to move in, bulldoze the earth, and pollute and mess things up. His recommendation to do something about this went unheeded, unfortunately. So again, there's a list here, and I'm not going to read it all to you, but I'm going to point out that the Rosemont mine on the east side would have a whole bunch of very serious impacts. The most important being water quantity and water quality degradation. The second most important would be air pollution. Saguaro National Park East has written a report, and this is, of course, they are part of the federal government as well, but they've expressed serious concerns about what would happen to the air quality over Saguaro East. It would be pretty nasty, pretty bad, for very poor visibility for a few months of the year. If we go down this list further, we can see the noise and lights, 24/7 blasting, crushing, and trucks. We have figured out there would be a truck on Little Highway 83 about one every 15 minutes, 24 hours a day. And that's a 2-lane highway that was built basically for traffic, of course, to go to Sonoita, to Elgin. It's now used by bicyclists, motorcyclists, school buses, tourists, and not a lot else. There would be a loss of wildlife habitat, as you also saw the jaguar, which comes into this part of the country now. The jaguar used to be as far north as the Grand Canyon, and it would be wonderful, I think, to have them come back. Serious decrease in property values. People who live on the east side of the Santa Ritas now have trouble selling their homes. If the real estate agent that they deal with is honorable, he or she says there's a possibility of a mine coming in here, an open pit mine, and the interested buyer goes away. There would be economic losses to the tourism, the wine country, the towns of Sonoita, Patagonia, the astronomical issues on Mount Hopkins. And then down at the bottom, it says destruction of nearly 100 archaeological sites. And that was mentioned previously, the Hohokam village on the east side of the Santa Ritas. To be fair, it would be excavated by archaeologists, and there would be reports that would be on library shelves, but the sites would be gone. So some years ago, an economist with the Sonoran Institute looked at the mine, and he wrote the following in his summary: if the proposed Rosemont mine displaced only 1% of travel and tourism related spending in the region, the economic loss would be greater than the entire annual payroll of the mine. And the potential economic benefits of the mine are slim, virtually nothing compared to the potential significant economic impacts. He went on to look at jobs. That's one of the big reasons why Hudbay and mining companies say we should do this. It's going to bring jobs to the community. Well, let's take a look at that. The projected jobs for Rosemont represent less than 0.3% of total employment in Pima and Santa Cruz counties for 2005. Now it would be less than that, I'm sure. Wages and salaries represent about 0.1% of total wages and salaries in the two counties combined. So putting this mine in, or what's proposed on the west side of the Santa Ritas, is not going to change the economy of Pima County in any meaningful way, other than negatively. Pie chart. Pie charts are always fun. If you look up at the top, you'll see a little tiny sliver there that says mining, 0.8%. Well, that isn't even open pit mining. Most of that is gravel quarries. So the open pit would be a third of that little 0.8%. And again, it shows you that it's not an important part of the earnings of Pima County. So let's turn to what's happened in the last few years. Let's try to bring ourselves up to date here. June 2017, the U.S. Forest Service issued what's called a record of decision. That means that the mine would be allowed to go ahead, and we filed suit. And when I say we, it is Save the Scenic Santa Ritas, the Center for Biological Diversity, the Arizona Mining Reform Coalition, and the Sierra Club. We, the four organizations, are in this together. And other suits, related suits, have been filed by the Tohono O'odham, the Pasquayaqui, and the Hopi tribes. March 2019, the Army Corps of Engineers issued a 404 permit that would allow Hudbay to dredge, to fill the streams on the on the east side of the Santa Ritas. Would have had serious impacts on Davidson Canyon and Cienega Creek. We filed another suit. July 2019, good things happened. Judge James Soto overturned the Forest Service's approval of the mine. That meant it could not go ahead. But then, of course, what happened? December of that year, Hudbay appealed. And in February 2021, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals heard the case. We have still not heard the result of that almost a year later, but we will, and it'll be relatively soon. So in addition to legal activities, one of the things we try to do is keep this issue in the public eye. This is an ad we put in Tucson Lifestyles magazine a couple of years ago, just to show what a beautiful place this is and what would be lost if a mine went in. Now we'll take a look at a few more recent events. September 2021, Judge Marquez voids the Trump administration's attempt to remove Clean Water Act protection from nearly all ephemeral streams and springs in Arizona. Now I know this gets a little wonky and a little techie sounding, but unfortunately during the Trump administration, the Clean Water Act was weakened seriously. And what the judge did was say that in Arizona, that should not have happened, because we have many streams here that are ephemeral. They don't run year round, but they still are very important for the watershed. September 2021 also, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service denied Hudbay's attempt to reduce the size of jaguar habitat. And then, of course, what happened December 2021, Hudbay appeals. So that's in the courts right now as well. These are all in the federal courts. And you need to be really aware that on the east side, almost everything that's happening there is a federal issue, and it will be resolved at the federal level. Did I miss something there? I need to go back one. Anybody know how I can go back one?
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Somehow hit.
Let's see. It should say previous right there.
Whoops.
That should be it.
Is that the previous one? I guess I don't think it is. Well, at any rate, we're going to move over to the west side now. I think we may have missed a slide, but at any rate, when Augusta, the prior company was involved, the executive director was Gil Clausen, the chairman, and he commented at that time, and this is back in, I think, 2008 or something, that Rosemont was clearly the company's primary focus, but that there were other opportunities, to use his words, Peach Elgin, Broad Top Butte, and Copper World. Now, where are those? Oh, and we did miss a slide. Well, we'll just have to go ahead. We're over on the west side now, and what I want you all to know is this, Emery's, this is not Hudbay. This is not an open pit mine. What it is a large quarry operation. Imerys is a French company. It is also in the forest, in the national forest, and it is operating a limestone quarry that has been good there for quite a number of years. It's changed ownership and it's gotten bigger over time. The white that you're seeing in this picture is the Imerys limestone quarry from Santa Rita Road. And I should say right now that Imerys is in the process of trying to expand that quarry. They've gone to the Forest Service, all their land is in the forest. They've gone to the Forest Service and have requested the right to expand. The Forest Service is doing an environmental assessment, and we will, when that is finished, we will all be able to comment. And I hope we can make it very clear that we think expansion of Imerys is not a good idea. This is what the Imerys mine or quarry looks like from the air. So now let's take a look at the kind of the big picture of what's happening on the west side. This photo, this graphic shows the big green square or rectangle on the right is the Santa Rita Mountains. The orangey square on the left is the Santa Rita Experimental Range. The blue turquoise line that's going diagonally through the left, that is Santa Rita Road. We'll go back to the right side, the big black irregular shape, that's the Rosemont proposal. That's the east side of the mountains. And if you look to the west side, the west of that jaggedy orange line that runs vertically through the picture, those little orange, funny little orange rectangles that are sticking out in all odd directions, that is the Hud Bay mining claims. That's the Hud Bay private land. Now, if you look just to the north of that, that yellow, big yellow piece, that's the Bureau of Land Management land. So you can see that the green, which is Forest Service, the yellow, which is BLM land, those are federal lands. And for Hud Bay to do anything that impacts those lands, they have to go through a lot of hurdles. So what came to they began to realize that they could perhaps avoid that if they could just move to the west. And so what they have been doing recently is buying up private land, the big red or orange, I'm sorry, the F-shaped parcel, the little blue squares down below and the orange squares. Those were private lands that Hud Bay has recently purchased. So if you drive over there now on Santa Rita Road and onto Hud Bay, Helvetia Road, this is what you see, a sign for their deliveries. They are using a lot of this private land just for their trucks, their big equipment, their storage yards. And if you do another aerial photo, this is what some of the impact that's happening on the west side of the Santa Ritas now. Expanding roads, putting in more drill pads. They're not able to mine, but they are able to do what they're doing here because Arizona has very, very weak laws, virtually no laws that deal with these kinds of issues. So again, on the west side, if you drive out there now, or I took this in the spring, Peach Knob, you can see the equipment at the bottom, you can see the road going through the middle and the impact at the top. And the same thing here, a little bit to the east. It doesn't look very good, but it's nothing like what would happen if they actually proceeded with mining. This can be restored. Open pit mines cannot be. So we'll go to the end here and finish with a cartoon that was in the paper not long ago in the Arizona Daily Star by Bob Binowies. I asked him if I could use this cartoon and he said, sure. So I think it's very clever. The beauty of abandoned pits. Abandoned pits can become tourist attractions. Millions of gallons of water, polluted, gone and forgotten. Wildlife gone too, also forgotten. Mining jobs gone. Sarita real estate, oops, and copper exploited to happy China. So what you can do, we'll talk about this a lot more at the end in the question and answer period, but I want to tell you a little bit right now. These are all kind of obvious things. They may seem not important, but they are important. One, choose candidates at all levels of government with care. In other words, if they have any impact at all, if their district or wherever they are in office has anything to do with this mine, find out what their opinion is on that issue. And don't vote for them if they think the mine is a grand idea. Let elected officials know that you support or oppose their position on open pit mining in the Santa Ritas. So if it's Pima County, most of the supervisors are very strongly supporting us. There is one who is not. You might let that person know that perhaps this isn't such a grand idea. Write a letter to the editor, Arizona Daily Star, Green Valley News. Express your concerns. It's really important to keep this in the public eye. And I want to say regarding local officials, local elected officials, we're supported by the city of Tucson, Pima County, Santa Cruz County, Congressman Grijalva, Congresswoman Kirkpatrick, several state legislators, including in this region, Representative Andres Cano and Representative Andrea D'Alessandro. And finally, it says, check the SSR website, scenicsantarita.org, and join our listserv. We do updates periodically. You'll learn, and you can learn more about the issue by looking at the website, and by getting on our listserv, you can stay up to date. So a few years ago, I came across this wonderful aphorism by a Blackfeet elder at the time. She's deceased now, a wonderful woman who I was able to see some of the things she had accomplished. Her name was Eloise Cabell, and she led an epic battle against the federal government in a land claims dispute, and the Blackfeet won. And this was her advice, which I think is very appropriate to all of us in battles like this. First, they ignore you, and that's what happened here. Then they laugh at you. That's what happened here. Then they fight you. That's what's going on now. And then you win. So thank you very much.
I'm John Murphy. I'm president of the Democratic Club of Quail Creek. I'm also a biologist. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about biodiversity in the Santa Ritas. The 4 book covers that you see there are my last 4 books. Here we have a map of global human modification on terrestrial systems. The darker areas have not been modified by humans. The brighter the colors, the more activity, the more modifications that have been accomplished by people over mostly the last few hundred years. And right now it's estimated that human impact on the land surface of the earth has exceeded 50%. So biodiversity is really all of the organisms that live in a given area or on the entire planet. And it's important for a variety of reasons, but the short answer is they're important for ecosystem services. I have a list of some of those on the left side of the screen. Biodiversity, all of these organisms, all life as we know it, is all kind of sandwiched into a relatively small area called the biosphere, which is about 10 miles thick. And it supports all life as we know it. Whoops. Let's go back one. So the biosphere is composed of a variety of species in these different kingdoms: animals, plants, fungi, protists. And the number of species is something that academic biologists discuss quite often. But the simple idea about how many species there are is really a pretty complicated question. Nobody really knows. The estimate that is widely accepted today is 8.7 million, but estimates of 100 million have been proposed over the years. Not all species are as attractive or as curious as a lot of those grasshoppers and katydids you see on the left hand of the screen, left-hand side of the screen, nor are they all as attractive as the jaguar that you see on the right side of the screen. A lot of these species are probably disgusting to most people. And you may even have a difficult time telling one species from another species because they look so much alike. But while they have similar morphology that you look at, they may have quite distinct sets of genes or genomes. Naming species is something I have a little bit of experience with. On the left-hand side of the screen are a list of species that I've been involved with describing over the course of the last 20 years. And you see a photograph of a lizard that has greatly reduced legs. It has little tiny front legs, little tiny back legs. And we described this lizard in 2019. It's called Bachia whitei, and it's found only on the island of Tobago. It's not found anyplace else on the planet, as far as we know. It lives in the leaf litter, feeds on termites and small spiders and mites and other kinds of invertebrates. And while this lizard probably has little impact on any human's life, it does play an important role in the ecosystem that it exists in, as do all of these species. Documentation of how many species are in the Santa Ritas has been pretty much neglected. And I have spent some time looking for checklists that somebody had put together for different groups of organisms in the Santa Ritas. I found very few. I found one list for plants, but when I went to look for one for mammals, I couldn't find a checklist of mammals. Using a field guide, I sort of estimate there's probably about 45, 50 species of mammals in the Santa Ritas. Birds, Friends of Madeira Canyon has got a nice bird list because so many people come to the Santa Ritas to look at birds. There's 227 birds known from the Santa Ritas. American Museum of Natural History put out a publication that listed 36 reptiles and 8 amphibians from the Santa Ritas. As far as I know, there are no fish in the Santa Ritas because streams with year-round water in them are pretty much absent. The other major groups of animals, insects, arachnids, myropods, that's millipedes and centipedes, and mollusks. As far as I can see, there are representatives of all those organisms in the Santa Ritas, but no kinds of comprehensive checklists. So I have here a photograph of a Gila monster, which is a pretty well-known lizard. And Gila monsters were for a long time thought to be very rare. In reality, Gila monsters spend about 92% of the year, that's about 335 days, underground. And so they just give the appearance of being rare. They're not particularly uncommon. However, the barking frog is a different story. Barking frogs live in rock crevices. They're found in the Santa Ritas. In fact, the first place they were ever found was in Madeira Canyon. In Arizona. And barking frogs don't move around all that much. They have an unusual life history where the female lays the eggs, they're fertilized, they go through direct development, they hatch out into little froglets. And this belongs to a family that is for the most part found in the neotropics. So the Santa Ritas have quite a few species. It's just not possible to put an exact number on most of the different groups. And the reason for this, I think, is illustrated on this slide right here. The red areas right here in the center of the screen, these are what is called the Sky Island Complex or the Madrian Archipelago. The Santa Ritas are probably located right down in this lower area here. And the whole Madrian Archipelago is sandwiched in between the Rocky Mountains and the Sierra Madres of Mexico. And so Sierra Madre species move up into here and they reach their northern limit in this area. The Rocky Mountain species a lot of them reach their southern limit in this area. To the west, you've got the Mojave Desert, and to the east, the Chihuahuan Desert. And of course, right in the middle of this is the Sonoran Desert. So you have all of these major sort of biological regimes that all sort of intersect right here at the Sky Island Complex. And this has produced a particularly rich flora and fauna. So Madeira Canyon is really the jewel of Santa Rita's because it has relatively easy access for people. And people have found Madeira Canyon in a quite spectacular way. I understand that there are certain days during the year when there can be 1,000 people visiting Madeira Canyon. Given its size, that's going to become a quite crowded place. So here's Madeira Canyon down here at the bottom at this yellow thumbtack in this photo. And here you can see Green Valley. Here's the Arasaco mines to the west. And here's Quail Creek right here. Up here, Copper World, this is the proposed site for the Copper World mining pits. They're 11.8 miles away from Madeira Canyon. So you might think, well, that's a pretty good buffer. You know, it's not right on top of Madeira Canyon. It's not in this larger area of the Santa Ritas. But a lot of the species that are found in Madeira Canyon are also found in this northern stretch of the Santa Ritas. And in order for the mountain range to maintain its integrity and not be fragmented, which is what the mine is going to do, it's going to be important to sort of keep an eye on the impact it has on the overall structure of the mountain's ecology. Now, a side project that I started working on, and I didn't realize it was going to intersect with this one a few months ago, was to look at how many species had actually been described from Madeira Canyon. So I started doing some research and I started counting species and making a list of all the species that had been described based on specimens collected in Madeira Canyon. And I stopped when I got to 101. I'm sure there are more than this, but I think this makes the point. And the point being that Madeira Canyon and the Santa Ritas have a quite important role to play in biology of the Arizona and biology of the Sierra or in the Madeira Island complex. So here's an ant called Pagonomyramex bicolor. Was described in 1968, and it was first collected in Madeira Canyon. Now, it's probably spread other places. It's not just in Madeira Canyon, it's in other places in the Santa Ritas, and it may be present in other mountain ranges in the Sky Island complex. But its type locality is Madeira Canyon. This is a list of 101 species that I found from described from Madeira Canyon first. And on this list, there are a few snails, some scorpions, 5 species of spiders, a couple of pseudoscorpions, a camel spider, a mite, but there's 57 species of moths, 12 beetles, 10 species of flies, relatively few vertebrates, one rodent, one bat, and there's a flea that lives on the bat that was described from Madeira Canyon. This little scorpion, Pseudo-Euroctonus Santa Rita, was described in 2015 and named after the Santa Rita Mountains. Here's a tarantula that was described based on material from Madeira Canyon, and it was named after Madeira Canyon. The epithet on the species name is Madeira. And here's the pocket gopher, and there was a subspecies of the southern pocket gopher that was described from Madeira Canyon. So Madeira Canyon also has, and the Santa Ritas have a number of rattlesnakes. And these rattlesnakes, the same species are also found in the Catalina Mountains. They're found in the Grand Mountains of the Peningalanos. They're found in just a wide variety of these other Madrean archipelagos, Sky Island habitats. And this one is called the ridge-nosed rattlesnake. It's a small montane rattlesnake. And these populations are all isolated from each other. And therefore, they have evolved different venoms to subdue prey that they eat in each one of the appropriate mountain island habitats. So here the snake is having some of its venom extracted, and the venom was collected and analyzed to compare it to other ridge-nosed rattlesnakes from other Sky Islands. So conservation of these species not only protects the organism, but it also protects their genes and the molecules they produce. And a lot of these molecules are potentially valuable as new pharmaceutical products down the road. ACE inhibitors, which is a group of molecules used in a group of drugs used to prevent heart disease, was the main active ingredient was originally taken from a Brazilian pit viper. So there are quite a few described species, but there are also undescribed species. And the undescribed species in the Santa Ritas, you don't generally get to peer into and see this before it happens. But I found a paper that was published a month ago, and it's titled Geographic Variation in the Green Rat Snake, Evidence from Mitochondrial DNA Morphology and Niche Modeling. Green rat snakes are, again, found in the Sky Islands of Arizona and goes into New Mexico. And this is where the green rat snake reaches the northern limit of its distribution. So it's a Central American snake. It goes all the way down from Arizona. It goes all the way down to Costa Rica. And oops, I gotta go, missed a slide here. The people that wrote that article took a look at the DNA, mitochondrial DNA, from populations across the range. And what they found was that there was two major clades of green rat snakes, one southern and one northern. This little map right here shows the distribution. The little squares and circles are where they collected the specimens for DNA work. The ones down here in the Yucatan Peninsula were originally described as Stentacolus triaspis. So that name has been taken. And the ones that are up here in the north that are in Arizona and New Mexico, they are an undescribed species. And they also come right down the west coast. That same species comes right down the west coast of Mexico. So it's entirely possible that these populations right here will be given a new name and described as a new species. Also, these over here on the east side of the central Mexican plateau are included in that northern clade, one of those northern clades, and they are also likely to be described as a new species. So habitat destruction on the scale of a large open pit copper mine or multiple open pit copper mines, it's entirely possible that you're wiping out undescribed species that nobody even knows are there yet. So ecological integrity is the ability of an ecological system to support and maintain a community of organisms that has species composition, diversity, functional organization. And it's pretty important when you go in and you take out part of a mountain range, you fill in a lake, you damage a forest to an extreme degree, it loses its ecological integrity. Another aspect of mining that has not been very well investigated is the impact of blasting on birds. And it occurred to me that while I was putting this PowerPoint together, that Santa Rita is a mecca for birders. Lots and lots of birders come to Arizona to look at birds in the Santa Ritas. And that when you start taking the tops off of mountains and digging large holes with lots of heavy equipment, the noise pollution could very easily have a big impact on birds. Birds use vocalizations for communication. They depend on hearing for communication. And there's a list of negative impacts of noise pollution on birds listed here. But when I actually started looking into the research, there's really not a lot of research that's been done on birds and loud noises, or particularly blasting. But I did find this paper by Bednar's 1984, where he conducted a study where he had 3 comparable isolated mountain ranges in New Mexico, one of which has been intensively impacted by mining, including blasting, and associated human intrusions for several years. And during the surveys at each mountain in 1980, he found prairie falcons nesting at 2 of the mountains and none at the mountain with the mining operation. Sort of anecdotal, but it sort of gives you a clue that these kinds of studies need to be done more. And there's another study that was done on peregrine falcons and aircraft noise. And the authors concluded that inexperienced pairs of peregrine falcons that were looking for nesting sites in marginal habitats may give up and move somewhere else because of the disturbance. So extinctions occur, and they occur naturally. They also occur because people abuse the natural resources. In 1850, the passenger pigeon was the most abundant bird in North America and very possibly the most abundant bird in the world. The last one died in 1914 in the Columbus Zoo. So in a mere 64 years, the most abundant bird in the world became extinct. Oops, yeah, let's go back. There's a riffle beetle in Madeira Canyon. It's called Stephan's riffle beetle. It was discovered in 1969. It was described to science in 1972. It was last observed in 1993, and it was declared extinct in 2016. So exactly what happened to this little riffle beetle, nobody really knows. This is one case where I think it's entirely possible that down the road it's going to show up someplace else. It might even show up back in Madeira Canyon, and it hopefully will turn out to be that it wasn't actually extinct to begin with. So there's an analogy that Paul Ehrlich, a pretty well-known ecologist, made back in the 1960s, and it's just as valuable today as it was when he came up with the idea. He basically says that species in ecosystems are like rivets in an airplane. So if you've got an airplane that's in flight and you pull out one rivet at a time, you can pull out a lot of rivets and the plane will will be doing just fine. But eventually you will start pulling out rivets that will cause the plane to crash. Just like if you start destroying species, you destroy enough of them and the ecosystem is going to collapse. So I think that's my last slide. I want to thank you for your attention today. We're going to turn this over to Chuck Stack, and he's going to give us a presentation on mining and public health. Okay. Chuck, do you see yours on here? Right here?
Right there, Stack. That's it.
Okay, we'll get you going here. From the finish line. Okay.
How do I progress? Is it left click or is it the button
It's the, let's see.
to go to the next one?
Yeah, it's the left one.
Left click. So left click.
Left.
Good job. Okay. Well, hi, everybody. Happy Saturday. I'm Chuck Stack, and I'm going to speak very specifically, like the title says, about the public impact or potential public health impact of the proposed Copper World mine. You'll see my credentials, MPH, Master Public Health, University of Illinois. BCES is Board Certified Environmental Scientist. I'm Vice President and co-founder of NeoCloris. We're an environmental technology development firm that does work in mining. We have, major mining clients. We recently were accepted into the University of Arizona Center for Innovation program to work with their Department of Mining Engineering. So this is a field we know quite a bit about. And I chose this particular photograph to open. For those of us who live at Quail Creek, you'll probably recognize this picture. The viewpoint is from the pavilion, the open air pavilion at the restaurant on the property, the grill. And notice, if you will, this little patch of light up here in the mountain. That's one of the sites where Hudbay Minerals is drilling and exploring to figure out where they want to locate these drilling, these open pits for exploration. So this is on the western side of the Santa Rita, the same side as the large white calcium carbonate deposit that we all see. And you can see how visible this will be from our community. I mean, we'll see it from the golf courses, we'll see it from the, all the property. And we'll not only see it, but we'll be impacted by emissions and also by the sounds of blasting, etc. Okay, a little bit about myself. I do belong to the Democratic Party. It wasn't always that way. I used to be a Republican some years ago and did work with them on environmental policy. But when I came to Arizona, I switched parties, and I'm very happy to endorse Kirsten Engel and Katie Hobbs and others. So I wanted to just bring this up. This is a little biographical thing that NeoCloris produces technology for reducing greenhouse gases. We're also looking at reducing PFAS pollution in our groundwater, etc. So visit neocloris.com and you'll see about us. Okay, historically, and Gail did a really good job of talking about some of the history here. This is from a historic document a friend of mine in mining sent to me, and it shows back in years ago where these mines were. The old Helvetia mining district. And if we look, maybe many of you have been up Santa Rita Road to look at what's left of Helvetia, and there's not much. There's a graveyard and a few foundation walls. But if you look at the names of these old mines, the Peach Mine, here's Copper World right here, and Elgin is hanging out here somewhere. So here's Elgin. So Hudbay is coming and exploring, re-exploring old mines that were developed back in the 1800s. And as they say, past is prologue. Here's a kind of a cool picture from this historical document. And if anyone wanted to email to me, I'd be happy to send it. It's fascinating reading about the history of mining up in that part of the world. They had quite a bit of infrastructure back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, including this old rail car network for moving ore and finished products around up there in the western side of the mountain. Oops, how do I go back one?
Right click. And then put a previous.
Okay, this is another cool picture. And like I said, if you've ever been up to look at what's left of Helvetia, you'll see that there's just nothing. There's maybe a couple foundation walls and a graveyard, which is very hard to find. But this is what it looked like back in 1901, according to the document I have. They had a post office, they had schools, they had a general store, so it was a little bit of a thriving mining community, all based around copper production. They even had a smelter up there, which fortunately is not so far being proposed by anyone. So just again, past is prologue, and we're facing again a re-exploration. Okay, and looking now, Gail also gave some pictures. This is from the paper, Arizona Daily Star, photograph showing some of the road construction being performed by Hudbay to both gain access to places to drill for the copper. They have to build pads, and then they drill down quite deep, 1,000 feet or more, to pull out sections that they analyze to see what the grade of the copper ore is. So you can see there, this is not that long ago. October 30th is 2021 was when this picture was published. And if you live in Quail Creek, go out by the golf course or by the grill and look out into the mountain at night, and you'll see just a tremendous number of lights showing drilling activity and construction. Hudbay Minerals is being very active in their development of this project right now, although I don't believe they filed a mining plan.
Nope, they don't have to.
Okay, and Gail said they don't have to.
The state
So
doesn't require.
state doesn't require a mining plan. How lovely. Okay, anyway, we'll just keep watching for developments. And this is the reclamation plan. I'm going to give some sections next that are taken directly from that. This was filed with the state of Arizona Department of Mine Reclamation and was basically rubber stamped. They encouraged people to write. I wrote and requested a public hearing and got a, just sort of a terse go away letter. But just August 2021, and this document contains a great deal of specific engineering information and operational information about what exactly Hudbay Minerals is proposing to do up in the western side of the Santa Ritas facing Quail Creek and Green Valley. Okay, the mining technique they'll use is an open pit mine. For copper, we typically either dig a big hole in the ground and scoop it out, or they have to go underground and build mine shafts and things. So this would be an open pit mining technique. And you can see we're talking quite a bit of material, and they keep revising the amount of material they think they're going to be able to get out of this. It keeps going up. So I think they're economically motivated to develop this mine. One thing that concerns me as an environmental scientist, and I've had training in atmosphere chemistry and occupational medicine, is the fact that this thing will be at about 4,000 feet, 4,680 feet above mean sea level. Realize that Quail Creek is just about 3,000 feet. So this mine and all of the equipment and chemical treatment and everything will be literally hanging over our heads on the side of a mountain facing us, which is, I find, very concerning. And then the very last says mining operations use large-scale equipment, mining shovels and haul trucks and rotary blast drills. So right here, this one sentence, they admit that there's going to be a substantial amount of greenhouse gas production and diesel fuel consumption, as well as dynamite used to blast and break up the porphyry mine. Okay, also from the same permit for reclamation that was filed with the state, it's a couple of interesting things. Right-of-ways have been established through state land with the Arizona State Land Department for the mine's power and water utilities. This would appear to be the Santa Rita Experimental Range, which is operated, maintained by University of Arizona. It's basically a wilderness land that is studied scientifically and to determine how rangeland recovers after it's grazed upon. And then this, I thought, I'm work in the field of water very actively. This license agreement language that appeared in the plan was concerning to me because I'm not aware of a license agreement. I live in Quail Creek. I've never seen a public announcement. So this license agreement for the town of Santa Rita to provide water, I don't know what water, where it would come from, if it's capped water. So that's something that really needs to be looked into. Oh, sorry, go back one.
Mhm.
And then I'll get to that mining shovel in just a second. That's pretty touchy.
You want to go back? one
Yeah,
more?
yeah, keep going, get one more.
One more.
Okay. Now, like Gail, I've driven up to the, as far as I could go, up to the Helvetia district. And this is a sign that you'll see up very close to where you can go no further. There's a big sign saying no trespassing, property of Hud Bay Minerals. But this was the public notice for the Rosemont mine on the eastern side of the mountain. And what Hud Bay has proposed to do and went through public hearings was to bring the power lines and the water utility lines up through the Arizona Experimental Range and, go over the top, the ridge line of the mountain and down to the Rosemont mine. It looks to me from reading their permit for mine reclamation that they plan on using the same route to bring water for drilling and blasting and producing copper from the western side, which they call Copper World. So I still trying to get some information on this thing. Okay, and we know that they said that they use shovels, mining shovels, and haul trucks and blasting. This is a mining shovel, Caterpillar, impressive things. If you're a little kid and you got a Tonka toy that looks like that, you'd be thrilled. But these things run on diesel fuel. They put out just a tremendous amount of pollution from burning diesel, particulates, and carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide. And one thing Gail Hartman mentioned about jobs, the mining industry is rapidly going to robotics. And so many of these things won't even have human operators. They will be operated by artificial intelligence and radio signals, SCADA, which is the computer supervisory control, etc. So when a mining company talks about all the jobs, they're actually trying to get away from human employees, because human employees, you have to pay them and give them benefits. They get hurt or get killed. And that's something I'm seeing in the mining industry worldwide. This is a Cat haul truck. Again, look at the size of that thing. They're not very fuel efficient. And the mining industry is hoping to run these things on hydrogen gas or electricity or something that has a lower impact on the climate, but it's very experimental right now. So if someone were to promise that they would bring up hydrogen powered trucks, etc. It's going to take a good 10 years to do that. And this is a shovel. Notice here the dust, the fine dust, and I've called this slide public health impacts for a reason. One of the big public health impacts that we have from copper mining is the dust from excavation and processing the ore. They have to grind it and store the tailings, and you get this very fine, finer than talcum powder, particulate matter, which can be dispersed through the atmosphere, and you can just kind of get an impression. Workers in this environment have to wear a lot of protective gear and filters and things, so we in the community don't do that. And then if it's built, this is how it'll affect our health in a number of ways. The number one I point to is air emissions, and also greenhouse gases. They don't really have a good way to control greenhouse gases. Water consumption, of course, the previous speakers talked a little bit about water consumption, the impact on the tribes, and then contamination of groundwater. AMD is acid mine drainage. So when the mine is built, whenever it rains, the water just sort of sits and collects, and it becomes this very toxic brew that's acidic and contains arsenic and lead and all sorts of bad metals. The solid waste generation is significant in these mines. That's, I'll give you a slide on that. The disposal is across the highway from Quail Creek. We can see these large tailing piles from Asarco and from Freeport McMoran, which is sort of the state of the art. They just pile the stuff up. And again, it's full of lead and arsenic and all sorts of things. They have to manage those to try to prevent dust from blowing on our community, etc. Gail mentioned light pollution, and then also John mentioned noise pollution. The reclamation plan approved by the state did say that they were going to do blasting. And as the crow flies, this mine, these open pits will be 8 miles from Quail Creek. So we will hear it, and it'll have an impact on our golf game. Finally, mental and financial health. Of course, this is going to cause stress as it goes on, and I think that the impact on our property value will be significant. Okay, next one. There we go. And again, going back to the public health and the air side, this is a direct screenshot from the American Lung Association. And you probably know that we have challenges in Pima County related to air quality. We do have ozone alerts here. We're in a valley. Our particular valley here we call the Santa Cruz Valley, but Tucson is hemmed in by a series of mountains. And what happens is that air pollutants tend to get trapped in valleys. If you get an air inversion where you get a warmer layer of air up at the up high, it traps pollution like putting a lid on a kettle and keeps everything kind of forced into our lungs. I'm surprised that they gave us as high a grade as B on particle pollution. Just this last summer, we had very large dust storms. There were dust alerts for people to stay in if they had lung problems. We also had quite a few forest fires in Arizona as well as the state of California, and those contribute to the particles. So the atmosphere is not the big dumping ground that some of the industries think it is for them. And we have some pre-existing challenges before this mine is even built. Okay, this is a screenshot from an EPA website, the Toxic Release Inventory, or TRI. And it's hard maybe for you to see, but the big bar on the left, the big green one, metal mining. Metal mining is the #1 source of toxic releases to our environment in the USA. People tend to think about coal-fired power plants. This is where coal-fired power plants is, not even half. The units, this was in 2021, I believe, releases that's 18 billion pounds of releases from metal mining in the United States. So you can see it's one of the big ones. Other things, petroleum refining is down here. It doesn't even barely show. So these things do impact our community and our health a great deal. John, to do, yeah. If you show me how to go,
Okay, you're right click,
and then
that
previous.
pops up and you go to previous.
There we go. Okie dokie. This is from the paper just a little while ago. To put it in perspective, we residents of Santa Rita and Green Valley, Quail Creek, we already carry a very high burden of community health impact from operating mines. Asarco's Mission Mine ranked 4th in the state, and Freeport-McMoRan's mine ranked 7th. So that's the Santa Rita mine. So you can, I mean, we drive past these things. If you come into Quail Creek, I know people were not even aware that we even had mines. They look at those mine tailings, they've planted little trees and things on them and not realizing what's over on the other side. But if you just dig into a little bit with Google Maps and go to satellite view, you'll see the size of these things. And overall, they've been working hard. We haven't had as a mining professional, I can say they have been working to contain dust. That's part of their permit. They get fined. So we haven't had any big dust problems from Asarco or Freeport-McMoRan in a little while, but we have had some bad ones. And the new one, I think, is going to be a problem, Copper World, if it's built, because they'll be to our east, and the wind in this area tends to go from the east to the west. So the wind will just tend to carry dust right over us. Okay, let's see. Health effects. Again, my background includes training in occupational medicine and graduate school. I've studied health effects from things like Legionnaire's disease from cooling towers and things that we inhale. We studied asbestosis back at the University of Illinois. So I've had plenty of work and lectures on this. And copper mining, because of the dust and the toxicity of the dust, as well as other chemicals they work with, they tend to impact us with what we breathe. Fine particulate matter, PM 2.5, that's particles that are 2.5 microns in diameter. Very, very fine particles that are not taken out of our nose by nose hairs and things. Air pollutants that cause ozone production, including carbon dioxide and others. I'll touch on that. And then many of these compounds, because the dusts contain anything from cadmium to mercury to lead, arsenic, you know, these copper ore bodies that they're exploring are not just pure copper, but they're a mix of all sorts of metals that were forced up when those mountains were, originally the Santa Ritas were volcanoes. So the metals were forced up from the magma, and a lot of, you know, pretty bad stuff came with them. You can see in the bottom. Do it again, John. Right click and then previous. There we go. Health effects. This is one of the scary slides. PM 2.5, particulate matter 2.5. I think this came from an OSHA website, but they show you that the particles get in through your nose and mouth, and they're so fine. You know, our nostrils have hair, and our nasal cavities are moist, and they're designed to capture a lot of bad things before they get deep into our lungs. But 2.5 is so fine, it bypasses the ability of our body to easily capture them. And so those things go right down deep into our lungs. Larger particles, of course, we can sawdust or something like that, we can cough up or get out. But 2.5 is particularly bad, causing heart, lung issues. And one of the problems I see in our community is our age. We have a lot of retired people here. The average age in Green Valley is something like 70. So older people and the very, very young are the most at risk of pulmonary complications of things like mining. And I'm just really believe that this is a bad thing for, someone to do, is to build a mine in that location. And this is kind of what the mine would look like. This is a process flow diagram. This was Lakeshore Mine up in Pinal County, and it's actually very similar to what ultimately Hudbay Minerals wants to build facing Quail Creek. This shows this shows sulfide mine underground, oxide mine underground. Just replace underground with open pit. We have both sulfide and oxide copper, and sulfide is particularly noxious when it's mined and processed. The ore is crushed. It has to be transported. All these things generate dust. Here you can see the big cat haul truck. Piles of copper, dust, fine crusher, and then the oxide ore, they go through leach tanks where they dilute, they add dilute sulfuric acid to dissolve the copper, and then the sulfide is concentrated in a different manner, but they basically run this stuff around and concentrate it. They get the extraneous waste out of the ore, and then it goes, by truck or whatever to a smelter, and then wherever the smelter. In fact, these days I believe a lot of copper concentrate is going overseas to China, and that's where, because they have such lax environmental rules. The smelter is one of the worst environmental operations you can have in a populated area. So, and you could see the stack. This thing kind of reminds me of the old Gary Steelworks back in Chicago. And then this is the artist's rendition of basically the same thing. This is for Rosemont. And like Gail Hartman mentioned, of course, Rosemont's on the east side of the mountain, but you can see that there's a great deal of pipe work. In order to run one of these things, Tucson Electric Power has to bring 138,000 kilovolt power over. And the Rosemont side of this, I had calculated based on Hudbay's numbers, would consume around 5 million gallons of fresh water every day. 5 million gallons is a bunch. Here you can see these big gravity clarifiers. You can see the piping and the tanks. So water is used throughout the process, and it's also used to suppress dust. And I believe the Copper World mine, I don't have the water numbers yet. They weren't in the reclamation plan, but they look to me like they're going to be very similar. So if we had two of these mines, Rosemont on the east side and Copper World on the west, Hudbay is going to seek 10 million gallons of potable water every day for years. This Copper World, they say, would be mined for 10 years. So I have no idea where they think they can get that kind of water. The mining engineers I spoke to said they thought they could get it from Cap, but if you've watched the TV news and Lake Mead, that Cap water is not, being given away. And then this is a nice little slide to show how our air is going to be impacted. There's no copper mine on here, but you could just put one in, with your imagination. But all the pollutants, carbon monoxide from those big haul trucks, sulfur dioxide from processing the sulfide ore, nitrogen dioxide and nitric oxide are produced from combustion of diesel fuel. VOCs, volatile organic compounds, are fuel that evaporates when it's spilled, and particulates, again, that very fine mine tailing powder. This all gets mixed in our atmosphere, which turns into sort of a big cauldron. And when sunlight is added to it, we start generating these, it's called photochemical smog. A big one for us here in Pima County, and we got that F from the Lung Association, is from ozone. And I think, any of us that have pre-existing lung conditions, COPD, or asthma type things know that we have to be careful in Pima County. And then particulates, of course, are added into the mix. And then this is interesting. We don't have that many factories, but as far as airplanes, well, we've got Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. We have the Tucson Airport, and we have the Air National Guard. So we have some significant sources of air pollution from air transport here. As far as vehicle exhaust, they want to build the Sonoran corridor, which would run down Santa Rita Road and connect I-19 and I-10. So that'll bring more trucks if it gets built. It's still being discussed. And this is interesting. It shows the wildfire component, which I mentioned. This last summer, we may remember that when California had these huge fires, you could see the smoke in the air. It was really very disturbing, in addition to our own fires. Let's see. Let me go and see if that might have been my last one. Okay, last slide. Can Copper World be stopped? Gail, do you like that picture?
Yeah.
The answer is yes. In fact, the track record for big toxic copper mines in the United States is not good right now. Massive copper mine in Alaska that would impact native tribes in their salmon fishing, called the Pebble Mine, presently is halted. Permits are, maybe pulled. EPA has gotten involved. So that one is not healthy. Up in the Boundary Waters area of Minnesota, one of the prime fishing areas in our country, and canoeing, there's a mine was going to be built by people from the country of Chile. It's called the Twin Metals Mine. That one has been stopped because the impact it have on the fresh water and again on native tribes. And the third one up north of us in Phoenix, called Resolution Mine, is in danger. That would be a mine that would destroy very sacred land to the Apache tribe. And so, those are three I just mentioned. What we can do, as Gail said, write to your people. Start locally, please. If you live in Santa Rita, write to Mayor Tom Murphy. He's been a vocal exponent of the Copper World mine. We should let him know that not everybody believes the lie of, this will be this great economic benefit for us here. And we also can write, I've written to Pima County supervisors. We can, write to whomever you feel you want to write to, but write or call and do it often. So that's all I have to say, John.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Chuck. Okay, we're going to go over to Stan. And Stan, do you have any questions?
Do I have any questions?
Yeah.
No.
Not
you.
necessarily of your own, but those that have been supplied by the
Oh,
people who have been watching this.
well, there are just a million questions here.
Oh, I'll read some on the chat.
Yeah.
Stan, I would
I
say,
don't-
this is Ginger. I would just say that the questions, the chat and the questions that came in, I sent them to you as direct messages in chat. So if you are able to just look at those, or the ones from me or from Phil, you can see them all. Yes, there are many excellent questions.
There are many, not just questions, but comments.
Yes,
So I'm trying to sort through which is which.
Can I add
Right.
the first one? about
Sure.
the-
probably the questions are, to me, would be, perhaps others would disagree, but to me, those are the most pertinent ones at the moment, but I don't know.
Okay, this is Chuck. Let me grab the first one about Robeson building 400 more homes.
Yeah,
We see that, okay? We drive in here and the town of Sa Juarita, the Rancho Sa Juarita, This is an area that's burgeoning, that with, all the bad weather up north, everybody seems to be coming down here. So I think we're just going to expect to see increased population, very likely more families. I used to teach at Walden Grove High School, so I know some of the dynamics, and that's a great point. And in order to meet the demands of people, you have to be able to prove that you can meet the water. So I don't know what is being done to accommodate, proposed population growth, as opposed to either 5 or 10 million gallons a day. And it's not sewage. I mean, these guys want potable water. They want, the water we drink to operate these mines. So we have to ask our representatives and say, what's going on?
I'm just looking at a few of the questions, okay? One of the questions that Chuck didn't have an answer for is, where is this water going to come from? Well, Rosemont already has a well field in Santa Rita, which they intend to use for the Rosemont mining. And I think it's obvious that if Copper World ever flies, they will use the same water. And I suppose everybody knows that once you have a well into the groundwater, there is no limit to what you can pump. So this is a huge amount of water. I did some calculation years ago. If Rosemont were to pay the price that Phoenix pays for water, whatever that was, over the 20 years of the Rosemont mine, there would be $1 billion worth of water that Hudbay basically uses up. $1 billion, think about that. And that's free water. We've given them $1 billion worth of water. Anyway, so the question here, who managed the impact of groundwater from mining on the community needs? Nobody.
Yeah.
This is, as I just pointed out, water is free, and they don't speak to anybody, and there are no filters. So a lot of people, is it true that Hudbay has drilled a water well near our aquifer? Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, sure.
They have a whole series of wells in Santa Rita. And as the Freeport-McMoRan paid to bring cap water down toward Santa Rita, and they think that that's going to help them. They also are pumping clearly from the aquifer. The wells that Freeport is using are off to the east of Canoa Ranch. And again, they pump what they want. There is not an infinite amount of water in the aquifer, that's clear. And as they pump more and more and drill the wells deeper and deeper, the aquifer water becomes saline and is undrinkable, probably still works for the mine. Capacity, math on the capacity of the aquifer, not that I know of. What entity has the final say in Rosemont going forward? That's a very good question. We keep fighting them and they keep appealing. You have to understand, I think, that Hudbay has invested a huge amount of money in Rosemont, and they're not going to give up easy. And we're fighting them. It's like a David and Goliath situation. I'm just still looking for some of the other questions.
Dan, this is Gail.
Yeah.
I thought I would add just a little bit to an addendum to your comment about water, just so people understand that in 1980, the state of Arizona passed a groundwater law that creates these metropolitan areas that do have some guidance as to how water should be used. But in order for that to be passed, the mines, the only way the mines would agree was to let them continue to pump as much water as they want, you know, as deep as they want, and they don't really have to get a permit. They get a paper permit, but it's a must issue permit. So that is just a good example of where the state law in Arizona needs to change. It won't be easy, but it comes back to the statement that several of us have made before. When you're going to vote for somebody, ask your legislator, your potential person you're talking to, what they would do about allowing mines to continue to have free water in Arizona.
Good point. Thank you. So another question here. All of us residing close to the existing mine want to know what steps are being taken to make sure there isn't any runoff of chemicals to our homes and the dust control problem is still ongoing. Well, all of that's technically being controlled because the mines have permits for air. They have permits for water in the aquifer. And the problem is we have an agency in Arizona called the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, which is almost an oxymoron, in my opinion. But anyway, they are very mine favorable. The permits are written in a way that is very favorable to the mines. The dust is controlled by Pima County, and we know there are dust storms coming off the tailings piles on the west side of the Santa Cruz Valley and the existing mines. And they sometimes get fined for doing that, but truly the fines are ridiculous, and they're not causing the mines any monetary issues. So it's almost the Wild West. Somebody asked here, what are the solutions to the use of copper and all of the other metals we are using right now in our computers, cell phones, and cars? I don't know that there is any. We love to put copper in all of those things. I read a report from a think tank that projected into the future what the use of copper would be. And it turns out that the green future is not heavy in copper, at least from this particular report, meaning as we expand our population and grow, we all use copper for that. But the green part of our future is not particularly heavy in copper. Doesn't mean we don't need copper. We do, because the population growth is not slowing down.
Stan, let me make one more
yeah.
comment on that too.
Sure.
I have used in the past a slide, which I did not use today, that talks about that very issue of the need for copper, which of course, in addition to jobs, is what the mining companies like to tout. Well, any of you that have lived in Arizona for any length of time know there are quite a number of existing copper mines in southern Arizona right now. Morenci, of course, Safford, and there are others. We did a little research into this a few years ago, and at that time, none of them were operating at full capacity. Now that may have changed, but I don't think it has. And it was quite clear that this mine is not necessary to fulfill our need of copper. We have to come up with, I think, looking at it as a set of values. What is more important here? Yes, we need copper. Perhaps we could learn to use less copper, but do we want to get it from this mountain range? Do we need to get it from this mountain range? What are the other values that we would be destroying? And to me, it's fairly obvious that the Santa Ritas have a lot more value than being used for open pit copper mines.
Stan, can I make a technical observation? working as I do with the University of Arizona School of Mining Engineering and some of their people, there are some new technologies that are being developed in the world, Europe as well as the United States, that should improve the environmental performance of copper mining. We see these massive piles of copper tailings, copper mine tailings along the Nogales Highway, and those are actually quite rich in leftover metals. They were not very efficient when they extracted copper, sort of like the old cars we used to drive in the 1960s were not very fuel efficient. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to look at those tailings as a resource, go back and start mining into these tailings. People in old gold mines from the 1800s, people are already going through tailings from old gold mines and making a fortune. So there's a lot of copper. We don't necessarily have to dig a greenfield copper open pit. But right now there's no environmental or economic penalties in Arizona, at least, that are going to prevent this type of thing. We have to just keep pushing. But what I see up in Minnesota and Alaska and some other places is it's getting more difficult for these people. That's all, Stan.
I just see another comment here from Kristen Engel that I would like to read to everybody. It says, although not on federal land, Copper World would need to get a federal take permit and habitat conservation plan under the Endangered Species Act. Yeah, absolutely. If it is determined that it will take endangered species. John can perhaps comment on that. Can you update us on whether an agency has determined the impact of Copper World on endangered species? No, because they haven't been asked to look at that problem. It would definitely be difficult, but has there been any discussions with ADWR about creating a new active management area in the region or petitioning under the law to establish one? A long, long shot, to be sure. You have any comment on that, John?
Well, I'm not sure what species specifically would be considered endangered in that particular area. I would not be at all surprised if there aren't some endangered species in that area. But I mean, the jaguars, when they come up from Sonora, they're wandering all over the Santa Ritas. And that was really the basis for Judge Soto to declare Rosemont, that the construction and the mining needed to stop because that was habitat for jaguars. But you need to have some specific species. Mexican garter snakes, the Chiricahua leopard frogs, the lowland leopard frogs, whatever endangered species are in there, they should be required to get permits for them before they can go in there and basically wipe them out.
Good question.
I'm just looking at more. There are quite a lot of questions revolving around the owner of Quail Creek and what they are thinking of doing. And I can't.
I doubt that they're very concerned about this. In fact, at one point, I'm pretty sure Robeson had an agreement to sell water to Hudbay. I don't know if that's for this Copper World or it was for the Rosemont project, but understanding how much water is actually left in the aquifer is a big part of the problem, I think.
Stan, when we moved here, I looked very carefully at all different property, and I looked at environmental disclosures for Quail Creek with my wife. There was not a single word in there about Rosemont Mine. So after we bought here and I found out that this thing was being proposed, I started looking around, and if you go to our neighboring community, which is Stonehouse, I looked at their environmental disclosures, and they in fact did say that there was going to be power lines put in for Rosemont Mine, etc. So Gail in her presentation talked about ethical real estate people. I would say that Robeson basically pulled a fast one. I don't know if they've updated their real estate disclosures, but people buying here, caveat emptor, because those should by law be saying, oh, by the way, there's permitted mines and mine exploration and high voltage power lines that'll be running all over. But take a look at them if see what your people think.
I mean, it's truly, it stuns me that Robeson wouldn't be worried about Copper World. I mean, it just stuns me. And so I'm guessing there's a lot of things going on that we simply haven't heard about. There's another question here that I think is pertinent as we get close to winding this up, perhaps. And this is for Gail, what are the top 3 actions people should take to prevent the mines? I know you had a slide on that. You might just reiterate the slide.
Well, I don't have the slide in front of me now, but as I said, when I showed that, these things, they probably don't seem all important to all of you, but they really are tools that have value. And I think the number one thing is to be careful who you vote for at any level of government, whether it's your state legislator, Pima County supervisor, town of Santa Rita, member of Congress. Inquire, go to an event, be sure you know what your position is on this, and state your own position clearly that you think this is not in the benefit, not for the best benefit of the community. Write a letter to the editor, any paper that you want to, but the Star and the Green Valley News are certainly are both good examples. Go on our website so you can learn more, join our listserv so you can be updated. Talk to your neighbors, inform them as best you can about what's going on, but make your position known. It depends who you vote for as to who gets in office, particularly at the local level. Your vote really does matter. And if there are more local people opposed to this, the better off we are. We have been told that this whole project is known throughout the country because we have so much electoral support for our elected officials, in addition to the grassroots support of ourselves, that more often than not, it's the folks that are concerned, the elected officials that are not concerned, but that's not true here. And the city of Tucson and Pima County, particularly the Pima County Board of Supervisors, right now it's a 4-to-1 vote. The one vote, fortunately, doesn't make much difference, but you might want to consider who that person is and whether you want to support him in the future. Those are about the best suggestions I can come up with. And there are a couple of other people online, David Steele and Dinah Bear, who might have some comments as well. Or maybe Stan, you do.
Well, I would also put a pitch in for our website, Save the Scenic Santa Rita's website, because that is updated fairly often with news about the legal issues that are going on. It has information on what's actually happening, a lot of information. So if you need to talk to your local politicians or write them or make some statements, our website is actually, I think, a great source of hard information that you can use.
And I would just add, Gail, that besides everything that you mentioned, there will be some regulatory processes, even for Copper World. Hudbay themselves have said they needed 2 state permits, the air permit and the groundwater permit. Now those, as we all know, and has been alluded to, the state does not have strong mining laws. However, the company has also said that they plan to put a tailings pipeline underground through the Bureau of Land Management land. The Bureau of Land Management has already publicly said they would have to approve that. They'll have to go through the NEPA process for that. There are other laws that were federal laws that will likely come into play. Hudbay has also indicated that they are actively considering merging this project in whole or in part with Rosemont. That raises a number of very interesting questions. So this is far, far, far from over, certainly on the federal level. That's all for now.
Very good.
There are many questions that are yet unanswered. One asks, what about the light pollution from 24/7 mining? Well, clearly the Mount Hopkins Observatory, the telescope, is very, very sensitive to light pollution. And we in Pima County, there's an attempt always to limit light pollution that is directed toward Mount Hopkins. And the mining, of course, would be a disaster because it's much closer to Mount Hopkins than anything else. And I suppose they're very worried and perhaps busy lobbying against Rosemont. But I had, early on, talked with some of the people that run the observatory, and they did not seem to be overtly aggressive about the light pollution problem. So I don't have more to say about that.
I'll speak briefly to the Mount Hopkins situation. My husband's an astronomer, and I've had a fair amount of experience with this sort of thing over the years. The astronomers on Mount Hopkins are very concerned about the potential for light pollution. But without going into too much bureaucratic detail, there is the University of Arizona involved and other organizations. And so the individuals can't speak out too much. There has been, by the way, an attempt on Rosemont's part. They've actually have a contract with a company to try to come up with less light. I mean, it still wouldn't be good, but I suppose to their credit, maybe they think they will win more friends and influence more people if they do not pollute quite as badly. And so they when I say they, Hudbay has done that on the Rosemont side. They haven't done any such thing on the Copper World side. Let me just say also what Dinah Bear has been saying. This is going to go on a long time. It's not going to be done tomorrow. There's no magic bullet, but we do have a lot of possibilities. We have to stay strong. We have to not give up. We have to be rational. We have to be factual. We have to know what we're talking about. And that can get time consuming if you want to spend a lot of your time dealing with organizations like the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, the oxymoron department. It's not fun, but we can make a difference. We need to work in our state government, our state legislature particularly. And I think in the long run, we will prevail for some of the reasons that Chuck said as well, that mining around the world is changing. And these guys, if they can find greener pastures elsewhere, they will go for them. At the same time, they have put a lot of money into this, and they're not going to go away quietly unless they simply do not get permits that forces them to go away. But thank you all for coming today. I think John may want to sign us off.
Okay. Yes, I'd like to thank Chuck and Gail and all of the people that served as panelists, Stan, Ginger, Phil, Dave, Dina, and all of those people who attended. I think we all know a little bit more about Copper World than what we knew when we started. People are now much more aware of the problem. I see the question here. It says, for John Murphy, would you talk and share and provide the EPA literature citation from the graph you showed on your talk? Okay, I'm not quite sure what graph that was.
Maybe she meant me. Do you mean the toxic release inventory graphic that showed metal mining as the leading source, I could easily get that.
And then there's a question here about Santa Cruz has dark sky legislation for the last 10 years or so. It was a long drawn out fight. So apparently, you know, because Mount Hopkins is in Santa Cruz County, as I think Rusty pointed out. So I don't think, you know, this is just sort of the beginning of making people aware of what we're up against in terms of the copper mining. And it's a matter of just kind of staying alert and staying on it and getting people to talk about it and tell their neighbors about it, and you know, show sincere concern about what actually is going to happen if they actually put these projects into play. Okay, so thanks for coming. Watch the Democratic Club of Quail Creek's newsletter for more information, and we will see you next month.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Good job. We'll stop it.
Okay.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.
We're
Steve.
trying.
Thanks.